Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. It's time for our latest spoiler-filled movie review here on
the All-American Spookshow podcast.
We take a deep dive into what makes each movie good or bad. Stick around at the end. Donnie has
connections from the credits,
linking each movie to past episodes. Will gives the official
kill count.
Professor Smoke gives us
gore score.
And of course, we all give our star ratings. As they say, on with the show. Hello and welcome to another edition of the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast. I'm Josh and I'm joined here with Donnie.
Yo.
And the Professor Smoke.
Yep.
Will couldn't be with us. He's on assignment. But today we're going to be diving back into, I don't even know how to describe it, Hellraiser land. We're going to be opening up the Lament configuration once again. And we're returning back to the Hellraiser series with Hellbound, Hellraiser II from 1988. This is a direct sequel to Hellraiser from 1987. And I'll mention right out here on Front Street, back in November, I believe it was, when we talked about the first Hellraiser movie. That was episode 81, so if you want to go back in the archives and check that out, that would be episode 81. And then in episode 82, we actually did a Spook Show Spotlight special episode on Clive Barker, so we dove deep into his career. So if you really want to hear some, the deep background information on Clive Barker, that's the place, episode 82. And if you want to hear our thoughts and kind of the deep behind-the-scenes stuff on Hellraiser, go back to episode 81 for all of that. So I say that to say we won't be going deep into some of that stuff that we covered there on this one. So if you want to hear more about that, those are the places that we will refer you to. So before we get into it, I guess I'll throw out the usual information. You can contact us, allamericanspookshow@gmail.com. You know all the usual social networks. We're on pretty much every one of them. We have our YouTube channel where we do Deadline Horror News every Wednesday night live at 9 p.m. East. And, of course, we have patreon.com/AASpookShow. That's one of the main event spots, where every Tuesday we have video minisodes with the Library of the Professor. We're coming up here pretty soon. We're going to be doing Crapsterpiece Theater. We do Spook Show Rewinds over there. Professor has written articles. Professor's Retro Review over there. Lots of cool stuff. So we want you to join up. Patreon.com/AASpookShow. And, of course, we have our TeePublic shop where you can get logoed merchandise and other cool designs and stuff. And all those things are down in the show notes. The Linktree link there should take you to all those things and more. So you don't want to miss out on a thing. So before we get into the background information and talking about the movie itself, I'll go ahead and toss to the trailer for Hellbound, Hellraiser II.
The vision is renewed. The power is reawakened. The fear is reborn. Because they have returned.
Time to play.
Hellbound, Hellraiser II. Brace yourself for terror you have never imagined.
And your suffering will be legendary even in hell.
And horrors you can never escape.
And you wanted to know. Now you know.
Last year, they brought hell to Earth. Now, they'll take you through hell. Hellbound, Hellraiser II. Time to play.
All right, so there's the trailer for that. So some of the background information that I pulled up now, the obvious, sometimes we find other titles for the movies. The obvious one here is it's also known as just Hellraiser 2. In some countries, I guess they just dropped the whole Hellbound bit, and it's just Hellraiser 2. But it was released, Merry Christmas, December 23rd, 1988. Can you imagine going to the theater and seeing this and on Christmas back in '88? Smoke, you probably did.
No, unfortunately, I never did get to see this in the theater, and I don't remember. Well, I don't remember the gist of whether it was it ever released as an R-rated version and an unrated version, or was it only unrated?
Well, I mean,
only unrated wouldn't have played anywhere near.
Yeah, on IMDb it was listed as rated R, so I'm assuming that it did get released, like an R-rated cut got released. But I would imagine, because it didn't, we'll get into that in a second, it didn't make a whole hell of a lot, so it probably didn't play very long. It probably just depends on where you lived and stuff like that. So I would imagine it probably played in the bigger markets, and it probably wasn't on a ton of screens, especially it being Christmas time. This weird Clive Barker Hellraiser sequel is probably not going to get a lot of play at Christmas time.
There's about movies relating to hell and the devil and Christmas, because wasn't The Exorcist released either on Christmas Eve or Christmas, one or the other?
Yeah, I believe it was. I believe it was released around Christmas time for sure. And then, of course, you've got God, now I'm blanking as soon as I'm about to mention it. The one that we just did, Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now that was ironically released, wasn't it before Thanksgiving or something? Then basically got pulled after 1 week of success.
Yeah.
That was Silent Night, Deadly Night. That was episode 85.
Yeah, so that wasn't too awfully long ago when we talked about that. It was during the Christmas holidays. That one, ironically, just remembering off the top of my head, that one, it just in that 1 week basically that it played, it made more money than this movie did.
Yeah, if it had had a full release, without getting pulled, it would have raised even more, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think we pointed out in that episode, too, just not to get on a tangent, but I just remembered it, that movie made more money than Nightmare on Elm Street did that week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's crazy. But like I said, it came out, this movie, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, came out December 23rd, 1988 by Film Futures and Troop Star, and was distributed by New World Pictures. It was rated R, total runtime of 1 hour and 37 minutes, and on IMDb it's listed as a horror/thriller. It was filmed in Buckinghamshire, England, in the UK, and the surrounding area, like in a studio and a couple other spots there, for a budget of what I could find estimated of around £3 million. Now, apparently at the time, the pound was way less than the dollar. So, I think this was pretty cheaply made considering for the time.
Mm.
In the U.S., it opened that weekend of December 23rd to $3.1 million. And it was actually number 8 in the box office that week. I couldn't find the entire box office, but I did find out what was number 1 that week, and it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic Twins. Was number 1 at the box office that particular weekend. So I think it had been out a little while at that point, but it went on to a worldwide gross of $12 million. So not a massive success by any measure, but successful enough. And it probably one of the outside of maybe the first one, I don't remember what that one made, and I don't have it pulled up, but I would imagine the only ones that probably made any kind of bank were the first 2 or 3, and then after that, a lot of them were direct-to-video type stuff. So probably not many more of these that we do will actually have some box office numbers. It was directed by Tony Randall, who may be best known for Children of the Night, Amityville 1992, It's About Time. one of Smoke's favorites.
Oh, yeah.
The screenplay was by Peter Atkins, who also wrote, in addition to this one, he wrote 3 and 4. And he also wrote the first Wishmaster movie. It was based on a story by Clive Barker. It stars Claire Higgins as Julia, who she reprises her role from the first Hellraiser. Mm-hmm. And mostly she'd be known for a lot of British TV and a lot of stage stuff. I think she's done a lot of Shakespeare, that type of stuff. So she's more of a stage actress, throughout her career. But this one and the first Hellraiser were probably what she'd be mostly known for from especially our audience. Ashley Lawrence is Kirsty. She was in, once again, reprising her role from the first Hellraiser, and she's also in the third one, although I think that's more of like a kind of a recap. It's been a while since I've watched the third one, but Smoke, do you remember, I think that was more of a recap. I don't think she was really, starring in that movie, right?
Yeah, well, like you, it's been a while since I've seen the third one. I've seen the first two, even before we did this podcast, I've seen the first two fairly recently, and they were in recent memory. But yeah, the third one, it's probably been, I don't know, 15 years, probably more, maybe more.
If I recall, I don't think it was like a starring role. I think it was more like a recap, kind of catching you up to speed. Here's what's happened. Now let's go, kind of thing.
Sort of like what they did here, this one. Something else about, you mentioned Hellraiser 3, and, this one was shot, you mentioned England, the UK.
Buckinghamshire.
The third one was apparently shot in, or at least parts of it was shot in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah, well, some of it was shot. We're not up we kind of all outside of Smoke. Yeah. He lives outside of the Columbia, South Carolina area. The other three of us live in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. I know of at least one scene that was shot in Uptown Charlotte. In Hellraiser 3. So yeah, you'll know it when you see it when we sit down and watch that movie here. In a little, in the coming months. But anyways, yeah. So who was on? Ashley Lawrence. Yeah, she was in the first one, this one, and some bit part in the third one, and she also had a small part in the sixth one. And she was also in Warlock 3, The End of Innocence. A number of other things, but nothing as massively recognizable as these movies, really. Kenneth Cranham as Dr. Channard, or Channard, however they say. I don't remember exactly how they pronounce it, but we'll go with Channard. He would, for our fans, probably might be known from Tale of a Vampire, but he's been in a ton of British television series. I would imagine he's a fairly recognizable face to our UK listeners. Old Kenneth Cranham. Imogene Borman as Tiffany. She would best be known for this and Dream Child, and she also was in a number of British TV. But as far as her on-screen filmography, it kind of ends around the mid-90s. She didn't really do much else in the business after that. She might have went on to other behind-the-scenes type stuff. I'm not sure exactly what she does now, but her acting career pretty much ended in the mid-90s, so not awfully long after this. And of course, Sean Chapman reprises his role as Frank, and then the big one, Doug Bradley, comes back as old Pinhead himself. Once again, if you want to hear our deeper take on their careers and other things you might recognize them from, you can go back and listen to episode 81 when we talked about Hellraiser. One interesting thing that I found was apparently there was these documentaries that came out in 2015. It's called Leviathan, The Story of Hellraiser, and Hellbound Hellraiser II. Now, if you combine them both together, I think it's damn near 8 hours long. That's crazy.
That's obscene.
The first, and from what I can find, it's broke up into two parts. So it's they're talking about the first Hellraiser. That one's about 4+ hours long, just talking about the first Hellraiser and the making of and all that it entails. How many pisses they took. I don't know. I mean, when you're talking about something that long, you can get really granular. That's crazy. Yeah. But then the second one is it's about 2 hours itself. I got roughly about halfway through it, because I honestly found this right before the day we started recording today. So if I'd have saw this say a few days ago or a week ago, I probably would have tried to watch the whole thing for sure, because it was pretty interesting. But a couple little tidbits that I was able to lift out of it was apparently Michael McDowell, who wrote Beetlejuice, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Thinner. He was slated to write and direct this movie, but due to personal reasons, because apparently eventually, I can't remember, I think it was 1999, unfortunately he passed away from AIDS or AIDS-related illness. Mm-hmm. So it might have had something to do with that, I'm not sure, but for whatever reason he had to back out, and then of course Tony Randall went on to direct it. But that's interesting. And also one other little tidbit that there was an interview with Kenneth Cranham, the guy that plays Channard. He claimed or suggested that Gary Oldman was hanging around and that he wanted that role that he eventually got. So there's some alternate universe out there where Gary Oldman is as the main bad guy in this movie. Apparently, he had. I think not too long after this, he had to settle for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So,
Yep.
I thought that was kind of interesting. It wasn't necessarily saying that the part was going to go to him, but apparently that he had been hanging around and kind of he made it seem like he was kind of jealous of Kenneth Branagh that he got the role, and that this was something that he wanted to do. But I don't know. I mean, that's just according to an interview from him. So who knows?
Yeah.
I thought didn't they know each other from acting and plays together?
Yeah. I believe that's kind of the way he framed it, was like they kind of hung around in the same circles, and maybe he was around, something like that, and then doing other things, and that he had made some, it sounded like he had made a suggestion, like, yeah, I wanted to do that kind of thing. So I don't know if it was something he went out for or something that he expected to get, and then Kenneth Branagh got it. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh, like you mentioned, he said he was kind of badgered by his grandson. I think it was his grandson or his he was kind of badgered by him because his grandson or his son or something was such a fan of the first film, and he was like, fine, I'll take it.
Yeah, that was kind of what I gathered from that little interview that I watched. Is like he didn't know what the fuck Hellraiser was. Like, well, a horror movie, this sounds interesting enough, I'll do it. But you know, a lot of these people, like, this isn't really like what I kind of gathered. This wasn't really their bag. You know what I mean? Like, they're all like Shakespearean stage actors and actresses and stuff. And now, you know, because Clive Barker has connections to some of these people, you know, he kind of, you know, he's an interesting dude and creative mind. So all right, I'll do it. You know, that kind of thing is what I kind of gathered. So it's, you know, you get a kind of a weird eclectic mix of like British stage actors that are in the in these fucking sadomasochist, weird, gory horror movies. It's kind of odd. If nothing else, you can say like these Hellraiser movies are very interesting. Even like the background stuff that you find about it. But yeah, that's kind of all I had as far as background stuff. Did you guys dig up anything else that you wanted to point out before going to the outline of the plot here, and then we can talk about it?
I know that I think it's New World Pictures that distributed the movie, right? They put it out to produce it. That it was supposed to have a much bigger budget. You know, it was going to be a bigger budget than the first movie, and I think it did maybe end up being a little bit bigger than the first movie, but it was supposed to be significantly more of a budget.
Yeah. And
because New World Pictures was going through some financial troubles at the time, they had to scale it back, and then I think that's maybe why some of the more epic, grand visions of Hell had to be scaled back some.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it still turned out all right as far as the production value of it, but I mean, it was supposed to have been a little bit grander.
I think that went hand in hand with one of the things that I'd read, that, you know, that whole thread, and we'll get into the movie here. Well, I guess this is, before I continue, this is a good spot as any to say we are a spoiler-filled podcast, so anything we say or do can't be held against us from this point forward. We warned you. We're going to spoil the movie for you here in just a few minutes, but I only say that to say at the very beginning of the movie, where you see like back in the past when he became Pinhead or whatever, apparently that was supposed to be bigger and more of a story thread throughout the movie, and I think because of the budget, they kind of started, you know, like that's basically the only mention of it to kind of lead you to what happens at the end, you know, with the picture and all that stuff. So there was supposed to be more there.
That's one thing I do remember about Part 3. I mean, I don't remember all the gist of the details of it, but I know that they explored Pinhead a little bit more. I think his origin story expanded it on it a little bit more so in the third.
And I think that's what they had, what I had read is that, you know, they kind of just picked the pieces up of what they wanted to be in 2. They lifted it and kind of just put it, you know, weaved it into what became Part 3.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go!
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spookshow Horror Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So, since we're on the subject of old Hellraiser and Clive Barker, I thought I'd just go in and type in Clive Barker on Audible and see what the first few things that pop up there. And, of course, I see right away The Hellbound Heart, a novel by Clive Barker, narrated by Jeffrey Kafer. And that one's just a little over 3 hours long. So if you want to see the or listen to, I should say, the original material that inspired all of this. There's the Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. But we've also got, let's see, Imagica by Clive Barker, and that one's, good lord, 37 hours and 20 minutes long, so that's a fucking novel there for you.
Nah.
Pretty thick.
Donnie, that's you. All day and all night there, buddy. And one more we'll throw out. The Books of Blood, Volume 1 by Clive Barker. Various narrators there. That's from the Books of Blood's Book 1. That is almost 7 hours long, so not quite as long as old Imagica there, but still, I think that all ties into the Hellraiser stuff, right, Smoke?
Yeah, it's an anthology series. I mean, I think it might have a little bit of pieces of stories in there too, but it has Midnight Meat Train as part of Books of Blood, as well as Rawhead Rex.
Yeah, both all prominent porns.
Midnight Meat Train.
They really missed the boat there on not having two porns called Rawhead Rex and Midnight Meat Train. Leave it up to Clive Barker, man. And once again, like I mentioned earlier, we did go into Clive Barker's career there, and we talked a little deeper about all those things in episode 82. So go back and check that out. But anyways, yeah. So to download your free audiobook today, if any of that interests you, go to audibletrial.com/spookshow. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audiobook. So to summarize, now it's going to be a little longer than the other ones, but I think it summarizes the movie fair enough. So I'll go ahead and read this off so we can get into the little roundtable discussion about the movie. In the past, it doesn't tell you how long ago it was, but what would you say, Smoke? World War I, World War II, the flashback?
That was World War One.
That's kind of what I felt. World War One.
I mean, the uniform looked more like that with the pants and the.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that desert type helmet, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking it was World War One, and I don't remember if they necessarily stated in the movie or not.
No, I don't think they put a date on it or anything like that, and you're kind of inferring a lot just from the way he's dressed and everything like that. But he's a British military officer by the name of Elliot Spencer, and basically you see him transform into the Cenobite Pinhead. Basically he's fucking around with that damn lament configuration box again. The first mistake everybody makes. And twist, turn, pop, bop it, and bam, he's a Cenobite named Pinhead. Now you're reintroduced to Kirsty Cotton, remember from the first movie, and she's admitted into a psychiatric hospital, because of the events of the first one, and she's seen by Dr. Channard and his assistant Kyle. She basically pleads with them right there on the spot to destroy this bloody mattress that they found because she believes that her stepmother, Julia Cotton, remember from the first one, she died on it, and if basically that means she can come back from the dead if you keep this mattress. So of course the doctor's like, mattress, eh? Because apparently he's secretly obsessed with the lament configuration and everything that has to do with it. So he has the mattress brought to his home, and then he brings in one of the mentally ill patients to lie down on it and cut himself with a straight blade. He bleeds on it, and the blood frees Julia from the Cenobite dimension. I'm sorry, the Cenobite thing keeps throwing me off because of Cinnabon. It's an unfortunate term there. I just keep thinking about yummy, delicious cinnamon rolls when I think about Cenobites, and I should not be thinking that. But anyways, like hell, whatever that is, where the Cenobites are, that frees Julia from there, and Kyle, the assistant, having snuck inside Channard's house, he witnesses this and says "fuck" and then runs. Meanwhile, Kirsty at the psychiatric hospital meets a young patient named Tiffany who solves puzzles, conveniently enough, right?
Yeah, of course.
She's like a silent savant who solves puzzles. Perfect setup for this situation. Then later, Kirsty is awakened in a room by a vision of her skinless father, who tells her, by writing blood on the wall, that he's in hell and to help him. Kyle comes back and tells Kirsty, I believe everything you've said now because I just saw a fucking meat lady come out of a mattress. So they decide.
Meat lady.
So they decide to. So of course the natural reaction to this is, okay, well we need to go back to Dr. Channard's house. And meanwhile, Dr. Channard, who has been seduced by Julia, has brought a bunch of the mental patients to his house for her to feed on and regenerate. So now she's getting her skin back, right? Remember from the first movie, Frank, same deal. But then as soon as they come in the house, basically Kyle goes into the room and is instantly killed by Julia. And now she is fully regenerated, and Kirsty gets knocked out. Channard and Julia kidnap Tiffany, and they force her, like I said, remember she's a savant with the puzzles. They convince her to unlock the lament configuration so they can enter the world of the Cenobites. They go in, and of course Kirsty is following them. She actually has the lament configuration. Pinhead and the Cenobites find Kirsty immediately and then tell her she's free to explore.
Yeah, then, we have eternity to know your name.
Yeah. So then, of course, Julia instantly betrays Dr. Channard and pushes him into this little, hell phone booth or whatever, and it transforms him into a Cenobite by the god of hell, Leviathan. Kirsty encounters her old Uncle Frank Cotton, remember him from the first movie. He's somewhere there in the labyrinth in this weird morgue slab room that we'll talk about here in a minute, who basically reveals that, it wasn't your father calling out to you, it was me. I tricked you into coming here. I was pretending to be your father again. Julia then appears and then destroys Frank in revenge for killing her, and then that allows Kirsty to escape. Then Julia is then killed by a vortex that opens within the labyrinth, leaving only her skin behind. So she's ate all these people, regenerated, her skin's back, and then as soon as they turn on the hell vacuum, it sucks her right out of her skin, and there's just a skin bag laying on the floor. Kirsty and Tiffany, they find each other again, and then they attempt to escape, but then they're ambushed by Channard, who's now a full-on fucking weirdo Cenobite with this hand thing on his head, and he's got guitar string across his face, and Kirsty and Tiffany run, and then they encounter Pinhead and the Cenobites. Then Kirsty shows that she found a picture earlier of Pinhead when he was a human. She shows it to him, and then Pinhead remembers, and then Channard appears, and then easily defeats all the Cenobites, with basically 4 slaps. They're all easily taken down and killed. Channard then traps Kirsty and Tiffany. Kirsty finds Julia's skin and wears it to distract Channard, which gives Tiffany enough time to once again solve the lament configuration puzzle box. And then Channard is killed, and the door to hell is finally closed. And then Kirsty and Tiffany run out just in time before the door closes. So then at the end of the movie, they're moving men are taking the stuff out of Channard's house, and then there's that bloody mattress there, and then one dude is just straight up just pulled inside of it, and then another moving guy walks in what the fuck, and then a pillar rises up from the middle of the mattress, and then I think all the Cenobites' faces are in it, right? There's Pinhead and all the other ones, and then one of the faces is that Vagrant, that guy from the beginning of the first Hellraiser movie. And then that's the last line of the movie. What's your pleasure, sir? And then credits. So, oh boy, there we go. Yeah. Hellbound, Hellraiser II.
First off, this is neither here nor there. But every time I hear the title Hellbound first, Hellbound, Hellraiser II, it makes me think of this '80s metal song by Tigers of Pantang called Hellbound. That doesn't mean shit to the movie, but every time I hear it, that song starts going through my head.
You might be the only person that would go that deep into the old music catalog there to pull that one out, man. That's a deep cut.
It has nothing at all to do with Hellraiser or horror at all, or even being necessarily going to hell or anything.
Depending on your view of listening to the devil's music.
Yeah.
So
it is British though. It's new wave of British heavy metal, so there's a connection.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, which one of you guys want to go first? What do we got here on this old round table here? Donnie?
Oh, man. The opening scene, when they're, oh, fuck. I just watched the damn movie today. Anyway, I made a note, but no, there are some funny moments when they're kind of reprising everything. Anyway, the shit scared me to fucking death when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now it's funny. It's just it's kind of strange how you look at movies or scenes or whatever that once scared you as a kid, and you're just like, yeah.
Well, it's like when you're a kid and you're going to school, primary school, elementary school, whatever your school was called,
Oh.
and then you go back some amount of years later and you realize the urinals and the toilets are like 2 inches from the floor. Everything seems like you just walked into a little person's world. It's like everything's different from the way you remembered it being gigantic and huge when you were a kid. It's no different than this. Like, not to mention, obviously we've probably become more and more jaded the older we get because we like watching these movies. So like, it doesn't register the same way anymore, right? It doesn't have that staying power with you that it did when you were a kid. But these probably have a different type of entertainment value now than they did 25 years ago for us, and that's another good example of it. But what about how much of a good portion, I believe, of the first 25 minutes of this movie, really, and that whole synopsis, the plot outline I just gave you, didn't really mention it. Like, easily a good portion of the first 20 minutes or so of this movie is just retelling the first movie.
No.
That has to be about the budget, right? Like, it has to have something to do with the budget there. Like, well, we can save a ton if we just cobble together clips of the of the first movie and just make that part of the runtime, right, Smoke?
Yeah, this is definitely not the first movie to do that, and it's not the worst. It's not the worst perpetrator of that. I think that award would have to go to Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, because I think more than 50% of that movie is the first Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yeah.
Of course, you do get the line, it's garbage day, near the end whenever he finally does go on the killing spree or whatever. But to get there, you pretty much go through the whole first movie again.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's all original content by the time you get to that.
Yeah. 25 minutes or so of it of rehashing the first movie in this one too. But
yeah, it's like you said, it's not the most egregious culprit of this type of thing. I've seen worse for sure. But still, it's a good, wouldn't you say at least a good 15 minutes or so is just dedicated to kind of like, catching you up, and then here, we're just going to run through the whole fucking thing again, and and then just kind of set you up to where, you're on a new path. So that has to be budget.
Even though the first movie had just come out the year before. It's not like there was a big...
Yeah. It's not like, say, the time...
last year.
It's not like the time difference between, say, the first two Death Wish movies, where it was like 10 plus years later, like maybe you needed a recap on that, but with this, it was just a year ago.
Yeah. We did get to see a little bit of a Pinhead creation, like we talked about earlier. It was supposed to be more, and you do end up getting more of it in Hellraiser 3, but I thought that was cool. I love seeing, Doug Bradley outside of his, makeup, and then the sort of semi-origin, or at least very, very Cliff Notes short version of the origin.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and like you said, I know we get to more of that in the third one, but it's going to be interesting because, like I've mentioned before, I haven't really watched much past, say, like the third or fourth one. So I'm interested to see if I'm interested to see if later on, say like fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh movie, whatever, somewhere in there, surely they have to do more of the origin of all this stuff, right?
Yeah, it'll be fresh to all of us, I guess. I don't know if Donnie, if you've seen too many of them beyond the third one either.
I've the last one I watched was Bloodline.
Yeah, you've gone farther than I have already.
Yeah. Now I did see one of the more recent ones where it wasn't Doug Bradley, but the other actor playing Pinhead. I can't remember the title of that one right offhand.
I don't have the whole list in front of me, but that was only like, I think he has not been Pinhead in like maybe two of them.
Yeah, it was the first one, I guess. I think the first one where he wasn't Pinhead. Well, it was or maybe I'll put it this way: it's Hellraiser Judgment Day, whichever one that was.
Well, we'll get to all of them like we talked about before, and then there's going to be a new one supposedly at some point this year, in the calendar year of 2022. So
in the series as well.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we talked about that. So yeah, we got plenty more Pinhead coming our way. That's for sure, and all the rest. Including that one that's got CD stuck in their head in the third one. That we got that one coming at us too. But so I guess I wrote a question: what's with the various crazies in the basement? But I guess we kind of came to the conclusion there. What that was, right? It's just Channard's a fucking psychopath that is basically running experiments on the fourth level of hell or whatever on these guys down in the basement.
No.
But what about when Kyle goes into Channard's office and finds all the weird things? His over the top disbelief of everything, like, what the fuck, Jesus, what the hell? Everything he sees, like, He sees a coffee cup sitting there. What is this? You know, it's all over the top.
It's probably a good time to mention that he that actor, and I don't know if it was written this way in the script or if it was him improvising, but he would repeat things times.
Yeah.
You know, he would say something and then say it again for emphasis, I guess. I don't know.
There was also when they were, I think it was it Julia and Channard. They were kind of making. I guess they were making out, and I guess that was that a Cenobite vag, or was that just a skinless vag? I mean,
You talking about with Julia or?
Yeah, I believe it was Julia. Yeah.
Well, see, now I don't. I guess it's not Cenobite. I don't think she was turned into a Cenobite. I think she was just like.
Yeah, she was just skinless veg. Well, yeah, the meat lady.
It's a midnight meat lady.
Midnight meat lady.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Who gets just sucked right out of her skin, and then there's just a skin bag laying on the floor. Yeah.
The midnight meat lady meets Rawhead Rex. When do we get that one?
We're not going to do a good job when we're watching these Hellraiser movies of describing and trying to make sense of any of these things, to be honest with you, because I think only Clive Barker could come in here and like, yeah, this is what I meant, this, you know. Yeah, it's hard to explain a lot of it, including the fun house from hell. Like when they go down into the labyrinth and everything, and like all of a sudden it's like a fucking fun house or a carnival or something. Like, I guess it's like your own visions of hell or something when you go into this place. I guess is kind of the thing.
I guess so. Again, I don't know if maybe it was a budgetary thing and they scaled the sets back or whatever, but I know the whole thing of Leviathan kind of reminds me of a little bit of a Lovecraftian vibe there, because Lovecraft, a lot of his, not his creatures, but there was a lot of talking of geometric shapes and things coming out of these geometric angles and all that stuff. And so Leviathan kind of reminds me of a Lovecraftian type entity, I guess.
Cthulhu.
But yeah, I know he was definitely kind of underwhelming, at least as far in terms of like,
well, yeah, it's just
cinematic.
Like, it's just like
of all these kind of things.
It's just like a spinning top, isn't it? Right?
No.
Yeah.
Noticed MC Escher puzzle in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was expecting to see them like walking like up a stair, and then they come out and they're going down the stair and shit like that, but they didn't have that kind of budget. It's just here's a painting, and then like, all right, now let's cut to them walking down a hallway kind of thing.
They did have that budget for Jim Henson's Labyrinth, though. Remember David Bowie's walking down the MC Escher?
Yeah. I'm sure they had a much bigger budget for that, no doubt, than compared to this.
You talk about the maze. There was one time when Christy, I think it's Christy. I don't think the other girl. I don't fucking know her name.
Tiffany.
But I don't think she was with her at this point. But there's a scene where Christy's running through the maze and she leans up against this wall. And the wall just kind of shakes like it's made out of rubber.
I noticed. I saw something where like it was cloth or something like that. That I think.
Something. It's just like. Bleh.
And it's not because they're in like some weird level of hell. It's just cheap budget kind of stuff. Like it's not.
Yeah, that's what
it's not meant to be that way. What about the whole Frank scene? Like what the fuck? The entire thing. Like I get it. Like it was Frank all along that drew Kirsty down in there for whatever fucking reason. I guess he wanted her. Was there ever a real reason for it? Like,
before we go further into this, there was a thing of the actor that played her father in the first movie. I can't remember, his name escapes me right now, but his character was written into the second movie, but the actor did not want to play it again for whatever reason, and so they had to rewrite that, because initially it was supposed to be her dad, trying to get her to come help get him out of hell or whatever. But they had to rewrite it with it being Frank trying to lure her into hell now and into his hell or whatever. So that's why it was kind of, things were rewritten at the time. So I don't know if that's why it didn't make quite as much, didn't gel together as well as it would have with the original script if her dad had come back, the actor who played her dad had come back or whatever.
Yeah, that little just that bit, that 45 minutes or so that I watched of that Leviathan documentary, they did mention it, and they actually had an interview with him about it, and it was basically like, he didn't see the point of him coming back. Like, they had him there. He was going to be in it, like you said, up until like maybe about 2 weeks before they started filming. He was going to be a part of it. But then, like, I guess once he got the script, he just didn't really like. He didn't like the way his part. Like he didn't see a point for him to be there. So the writer Peter Adkins, his interview, he said not that he didn't like the guy or anything. He said, but he was kind of secretly happy that he didn't want to do it because he didn't think it made sense for him to be there to begin with. Because he said, well, her dad didn't do anything to be in hell. Why would he be in hell? You know, he was one of the few good people in that movie, right? So there'd be no reason for him to be hanging around in hell, wanting Kirsty to come find him. So he was like, thankfully, when he bowed out, that made the story make more sense. That it would have been Frank trying to, lure her in or whatever instead of her dad. But like with the Frank thing though, it didn't make a lot of sense. Like as far as what was his end game? Like, all right, Kirsty's here.
Yeah.
What did he want to do with her? Like, what's this all about? Like, haha, you're here. Well, what do you do now? I don't know. I got you here. That's all I had. That part didn't make a lot of sense. And then just the imagery of the whole scene. These weird morgue slabs sliding in and out with these bloody women under the sheets just writhing like they're having sex with ghosts or something. And they'd slide in and out, and like it'd come back and they'd be gone, and then they'd come back and there they are again. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, that's kind of a weak hell for him. I mean, after a while, you probably get used to it. Like, okay, they're just ghosts. I'm not going to get anything, so it's just whatever.
Yeah.
He's just rubbing one out or whatever. I guess I should do this.
It looked like he had pretty comfortable quarters for hell, that's for sure. Yeah, there's like a little makeup table in the corner, and stuff. Like, it didn't look all that terrible, I guess, considering. I just didn't know what the hell the end game was. And then, like, the whole thing, like, start to finish is less than 10 minutes of the movie, This seems like a huge plot device. Like, all right, we finally got her here. What do we do now? Fuck if I know. Let's make some bloody women come in and out on slabs. Oh, that'll be cool. All right, well, Frank's dead. I don't know, it was just weird.
Yeah, and she rips his heart out like straight out of Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Kalima.
I guess that's what it was. Like, all right, well, we got to have some reason to get Frank here just so Julia can have her revenge moment, right?
And then she delivered the same line that Frank delivered on her in the first movie, right?
Yeah.
That line says,
I have such sights to show you.
Yeah, she did say that, yeah.
Yeah, she got it in this time. And like I mentioned when we were talking about the movie, Super Channard. I say that because it's like, in Shredder and Ninja Turtles 2, he's Super Shredder. When he becomes a Cenobite, he's fucking Super Channard. But he's like super powered. He's like overpowered because he takes out all the Cenobites like nothing. Like, Pinhead included. Like, almost no effort. Like, bam, fuck you. Bam, fuck you. Like, they just turn back into humans, like briefly before,
You would think, I mean, how long have they been in this corporeal form in hell and, these almost immortal beings, and then these little tentacle arrows from Super Channard's hands kill them?
Blades.
Yeah, like, and then how he gets defeated, right? I mean, since we're talking about him, we'll just go ahead and skip to it. How he goes down, like, his little claws just get stuck in the ground. He like shoots him at her feet, like, oh no! And then that's what takes him down. It's like that old Simpsons bit, like in Treehouse of Horror, when Lisa comes up and kicks Mr. Burns is like, it's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mr. Burns is Dracula. Lisa just comes up and kicks him in the shin. He's like, oh, how did you know my weakness was my enchanted shin? And then he just falls over and dies. It's like that. Like, what the fuck? He just sticks these claws that just took out 4 Cenobites, by the way. He just gets them stuck in the ground and like, oh no, boom, he's dead. It made little to no sense. It was a little weak. Meanwhile, you got the Leviathan top spinning in the sky, shooting out black lights, And then when they're running away, there's just little sperms flying through the air at them. Pew, 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 pew.
Oh man.
It sounds like I hated this movie, but I really didn't. So I mean, So I guess the final question is, what the hell? The ending, like.
Who did hate this movie though? Siskel and Ebert hated this movie.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
How often do we ever talk about them loving something on this fucking show? Anytime they come up, it's like, oh, they hated it.
Funny that they just. I think I heard. I was listening to something that had them. Well, it might have been. Well, both of them. I think were talking about it, and it being just. You could come into the movie at any point and watch it, and you wouldn't be lost.
True, especially if you.
That part might be true, but I mean,
there is truth there, especially if you'd seen the first one. Like, if you'd seen that and you know what's going on, yeah, absolutely. You can walk in. You could just pretty much skip to the last 15 minutes of this movie.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we get it. Hell and all.
Yeah.
So what about the ending? What y'all think? I mean, were you satisfied? Were you like, what the fuck? I mean, Donnie, what did
Oh,
you think about the ending?
that's a dumbass ending. I just was like, I don't know. Just just like you mentioned, with Channard, just
Super
it's
Chandler.
sort of like, Darth Maul. Darth Maul was badass enough to fight two Jedi at one time, and then gets cut in half, and then you never
Yeah,
see him again.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but no,
And what about the very end though? Like, what's your pleasure, Mister? That like
God.
the whole pillar thing. Like, what?
Yeah, it honestly it kind of looked like those old CD towers that we used to fucking get at fucking Best Buy. Those little fucking things that spin around and shit. I was like,
You could put like 100 CD, like 100
yeah,
cases in it, and just spin it around. Time for Chumbawamba. Hmm.
yeah, man. It was there's not really a whole lot in the movie that made any sense. Didn't like the ending
I
though.
think in this weird Clive Barker world, it makes sense, but like you got to go to that place to really dig it. You know what I mean? Like to really understand it, I guess.
I'm
Smoke,
good.
Smoke. What'd you think of the ending and the whole pillar thing and just Chandler and all that stuff?
I think it was another victim of the budget. I think I did read somewhere where that they scaled that back too, and they just had the spinning pole thing coming up out of the mattress. But I mean, I appreciate the one liner at the end though, the whole what's your pleasure, sir?
Yeah, little callback to the first one.
The whole spinning pole thing with the things on it, because it was like that in the first movie too, right?
Yeah, true.
Pole
Like
thing.
that whole pole thing. Yeah, I think in the first movie it was like hanging from the ceiling or something, right? I didn't even think about that. Like
Yeah,
they
so
had
I mean,
the
it
chains
had
and stuff.
on
And
kind of in a way, it's kind of typical of that time period too of the movies. Kind of like you had the moving guys coming in and they're doing the
yeah,
it was a setup to the third movie, so to speak. So it was in a way, it's very much of its time. It's just Clive Barkerized.
yeah.
It's still kind of the same sort of let's throw it to another movie, to a third one, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it my way, and it's gonna be weird.
These days it's like the device is there's a cutscene. Like somewhere like here's the credits. Somewhere in the middle of the credits or after the credits, there's a cutscene to set up some type of sequel. That's kind of the thing now. Back then, like you said, right, it was usually like the last thing you would see, and the device was always the end question mark.
Yeah.
that was their thing back then, and this is definitely you got more of that in this.
In the case of the first Hellraiser movie, going into this one, I don't even think that the first one had barely come out in the theaters when they were in the process of shooting the second one.
Yeah, that's a good point. This was actually already got greenlit before the release of the first one.
It makes sense. I mean, because I pulled up my notes here from the first one. That one came out May 13th of '87. So you're only roughly a year and a half or so later when this movie was released.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they didn't have any idea at the time of how popular Pinhead and the other Cenobites were going to be.
No.
From the first movie, and I think that's why they kind of expanded them. That might be one of the reasons why they're only in the movie for about, I don't know, roughly 20-25 minutes of screen time. Because if you think about it, the Cenobites, they weren't in it that much. They were in it here a little bit at the beginning, and then they show back up a little bit at the end, and maybe a little bit in the middle, but most of it was Christy and, was it Christy?
Kirsty.
Yeah, Kirsty, yeah. And, just them exploring hell and running into Frank. And actually, I think Frank and Julia were supposed to be the main villains of the piece, of the first and the second movie, really. But, the popularity of Pinhead and the Cenobites kind of, took hold, and they expanded the characters a little bit more in later movies.
That was one thing that was pointed out in that Leviathan documentary, is that apparently some people were talking when they made this movie that they wanted Julia to kind of be, for lack of a better comparison, a new Freddy. It's kind of what their vision was. They kind of wanted her to be like a female Freddy or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the direction they were going, but then she just didn't want any of that. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't know why they would have thought that. I mean, you got Pinhead, this guy with needles, pins, whatever, rammed into his head, and he's Doug Bradley, and he's very energetic and personable. His character, he's got a great character.
Yeah,
I don't know why he didn't take the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, why would you not want to build on that and that energy that, like you mentioned?
Oh yeah, I mean, like you think of the pantheon, the whatever phrase you want to use, the of the great horror icons. You think Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, and Pinhead's probably right there, right? I mean, I think we briefly talked about that when we did Hellraiser. I mean, like if
Yeah.
if he's not 5, he's like 6 or 7 or something. I mean, there might be somebody, some major icon I'm forgetting, but he's right there. Like now. But even then, I'd say, Smoke, you might recall, by this point, but the second one, I think Pinhead was kind of the standout, right? Like that's the one of the Cenobites and everything that you kind of like everybody gravitated towards, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And he wasn't even written that way in the novel, in the novella, The Hellbound Heart.
Mm-hmm.
Really didn't. He didn't even have a name. I don't know that they really called him Pinhead any time in the movie either. I think the people on the set.
Yeah, I think he just.
Yeah.
I think it just kind of became the name, but yeah, I don't think he was ever officially like, "Hey, here comes Pinhead,"
So yeah, even in the novels, they didn't have a big role. They just were part of the story. And I think it wasn't until the makeup, they came up with a look of them, and then on screen, and then Doug Bradley's personality and everything just gelled really well, and they became the focus, especially Pinhead. Yeah.
And as they say,
and
the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yep.
And speaking of the Cenobites too, there was the Chatterer. There was a whole thing of that actor like complaining about not being able to see because the original Chatterer didn't have eyes, so I guess they had to like walk him. I don't know how he acted or what he did, how he did it, but or even if it was the same actor or not, I'm not sure about that. But whoever played the role of Chatterer in the second movie wanted eyes so he could see what he was doing, where he was going, or whatever, and so they gave Chatterer eyes, and there was a lot of people pissed off about that because, I mean, it messes with the continuity, and he really, I mean, for my money too, he looks better without eyes. I mean, the character.
And they're messing with the continuity in the same movie because at the beginning of the movie he's got no eyes. And
yeah.
And then later, in the movie he's got eyes.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense.
Well, it was something like he walked into like a hook. He took like a hook to the jaw or something like that, right? Wasn't that part of it? Like those hooks. Those hooks and chains hanging down. He's like, no, fuck this. You can put some eyes on this thing. But yeah, so I guess the time has come. Let's go ahead and give our final thoughts and our star ratings here. So Donnie, I guess I'll toss to you first. What do you got?
Oh man, like we've already mentioned, the story gets kind of flimsy at times, and it's Smoke had mentioned good deal about the budget, which we have budget concerns, budget constraints. There was one particular scene at the hospital when Channard is walking around, and god damn it, the fucking camera is shaking, and it's like they gave a toddler. It was like, here, shoot this, and it's not that bad, but it took me out of it. It drove me bananas. But and there was a couple of other times that happened there as well. That affected me.
Now to that I will add, something we should point out. I'm pretty sure this was like Tony Randall's first directing gig.
There's some. Now I don't really know about him specifically, but there are some directors that they don't sit behind the camera. They actually they're more so leading the actors in the performance, and the cinematographer will either like the scene or be behind the camera.
I don't know. I don't know exactly who you'd blame that on. Would you blame it on the director? Would you blame it on the cinematographer? Or would you blame it on the editor? Like that.
I don't know. I would say blame the editor, but I'm just kidding.
Well, that's just because I'm an editor. But
that's right.
I would say to that. I would say it's up to the director and cinematographer to get enough shots in the can.
Yeah, you got to watch the dailies.
Yeah, give me 5, 6, 7 options, so I'm not choosing the shaky ass shot. That's all I would say. But
yeah,
it's one of those people. I can, at the end of the day, maybe a producer, right? But it's one of them.
Those are the main detractors for me. But as we have already mentioned, it is ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun too. It's and Smoke would certainly, well, you as well would certainly agree with any sort of practical effects, or definitely gets a bump in my opinion. For me, definitely. And I believe that this had, I don't know, I would say maybe it did have a little bit more gore. I'll leave that to Smoke to judge, but my star rating is 3. I'm going to give it a solid 3 stars.
Like we said earlier, Will isn't here, obviously, so we'll get his rating and everything later on. But Smoke, I'll toss to you. What you got?
Yeah, this is part 2, as we discussed. Is sort of takes the budget had budget issues. It repeated a little bit of the first movie, kind of telling it at the beginning of this one. Took some time to do that. It did have great practical effects, and I think it had a little bit more gore this time around. That's in the fact that it was rated X originally by the MPAA, and then they had to cut it to get the R rating, I guess, and then they released it unrated on VHS. And I never saw it in the theater, as we mentioned in the beginning. The first time I saw it was on VHS in that uncut version. I've never seen the R-rated version. Would never have any reason to see the R-rated version. If you got the unrated version, unless you're squeamish for some reason about the gore, there's probably no real reason to go seek out the R-rated version. The practical effects were great. The stop motion effects, they had a little bit of stop motion in there, especially with the Super Chenard's tentacle hand thing, Yeah. And I'm a fan of stop motion in general. Ray Harryhausen's great stop motion effects, and I'm a fan of stop motion. But this one, I think maybe the budget, and they probably didn't have the time to make it a bit more quality of, I guess, stop motion, because it's real fast and it's real jerky. When they come out. Usually, those things, of course, take a lot of time to do. One frame at a time, and you get more realistic shots the less you move position. The smaller you make the movements of what you're doing the stop motion to. So it seemed they were probably rushed a little bit budgetary from that. But it wasn't terrible. We'll get to the gore score, but I think it did up the ante a little bit, and that's always good in my book anyways. It added to the story, I think, of Hellraiser, of the franchise. It brought it, you got to see hell, which that's cool. They talked about these things in the first movie where they're, they open the box, the lament configuration, things come out of it, but some demons and things happen, but you don't really get the depth of hell yet. Unfortunately, due to the budgetary concerns, we still don't get that epic feel that we probably would have had if they'd had a bigger budget. But I thought it was pretty cool. You get to explore these different areas. I'd say overall, I'm going to go with, I agree with Donnie. I'm going to echo Donnie's rating of 3 stars for Hellraiser 2 for me.
Myself, I'm not too far behind y'all, but I am behind you. I'm going to go with 2.5 stars. This one just didn't grab me story-wise like the first one did. And, and I've seen it a number of times in the past. It's just, I can't say that it got any better. It's been a little while since I watched it, but it hasn't been that long ago. I can't argue with 3, and I'd probably be right there if it just made a little bit more sense. I know it's Clive Barker, and there's going to be certain aspects of it that just don't make any damn sense to anybody but him, right? It jumps around a little bit too much for my liking story-wise. I appreciate the practical effects, and I appreciate a lot of what they were trying to do here. And like you said, it does kind of advance the story of Pinhead and some things that I definitely like that aspect of it. But I guess it's the budget and everything. I don't know. It just didn't gel for me as much as the first one. So, I'm going to go a little lower. But it's not that I didn't like it. I enjoyed it. It's fun. There's some stuff you can laugh at. It's just you got too many questions. I've got to there's too many what the fucks, with this movie for me to to really say that I loved it, So I'm going to go with 2.5. I'm really interested to see what Will's going to have to say about it. Just based on the fact that he did not like the first one, I'm going to say he probably ain't going to like this one much more. But hey, you never know. You just never know, Maybe this one grabs him or something, and we'll find out. First chance we get once we get him back in the room, so to speak. I guess, with the star ratings out of the way, and since he hasn't gave us his score, I won't go with an official consensus score on it just yet. So obviously, though, 2 3s and a 2.5, you're going to be somewhere in that 3-star range, until we find out what Will's ranking is. So, Donnie, I guess I'll toss to you first for your bit.
Connections from the crypt.
And there you go.
Yeah. So there were actually a couple of, we know Clive Barker, we know, basically every movie, if you can work with some of the same team, from, a previous franchise, or I'm sorry, a previous film within the same franchise, you always try to. And there were multiple multiple of these with past connections to the first Hellraiser. But that said, there was one that stuck out that had more connections, and that was the composer, which is Christopher Young. Christopher Young, he dates back to Trick or Treat from 1986, also Hellraiser 1, and then Hellraiser 2. And actually, Hellraiser 2 won a Saturn Award for the best music.
Yeah, it was a pretty solid soundtrack. We didn't really mention that at all.
Epic feel to it. I think the first soundtrack was excellent too. You heard that song too. You heard the Hellraiser theme song on a lot of things back then. I remember even there's like a MTV horror. MTV had a This Is Horror or some kind of segment they had for a while, and that was like one of the main themes for that Hellraiser theme was for that show. And then I think he expanded a little bit more on it for Hellraiser 2. It did have a little bit more epic feel to fit with the scenes in hell, I guess.
So with Will not being with us, we don't have an official kill count, but we'll go ahead and toss to you, Professor.
Gore score.
Oh yeah, now we finally get to another juicy one. Anyway, as we had already mentioned, it was originally an X rating, and MPAA, told them it's going to be an X if they released it the way it was, so they had to go and trim it up, get the R rating again, put it back in the video release for it in the unrated version, and that scene with the mattress scene where they had a guy from the basement level of the insane asylum, the guy who was imagining bugs were crawling all over him, he throws him on the mattress and gives him a razor or whatever, and the guy, of course, thinking the bugs are crawling all over him, he splashes himself up, he's bleeding all over the place. I mean, that was pretty brutal. I mean, that's one of those things where it goes beyond the, like, we talked about this before in some of these gore score ratings, when you got something that's just sort of fun splatter effects, and then when you got something that goes into that brutal, kind of crosses the line into like uncomfortable territory, I guess you could say that scene almost does pretty much there. I mean, he's just going to town on himself, flashing himself up.
Oh yeah, it does, yeah.
Plenty all throughout the movie, and then you have Chenard turn into Super Chenard or whatever, where it's the piano wire, guitar, string thing over his face, cutting into his skin, and then the whole his death scene of half his head getting pulled off. And
that was cool.
Yeah, and what about toward the beginning when you're introduced to Chenard, when he's got like that patient's skull open?
Oh yeah,
poking at the brain.
Yeah, there was a lot of gore in this one. Oh yeah, and also Chaz, like I've said before, I usually try to digress to Chaz Balin's gore score, since this is the concept for the gore score on our show is based on Chaz Balin's gore score in his Deep Red magazine. And he did do Hellraiser 2, and he did Hellraiser. I don't remember if I mentioned his rating for Hellraiser, but his rating for the gore score on Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 were exactly the same, and he rated them a 10.
Wow.
This time, though, I'm going to diverge a little bit from Chaz. Now, we've had more things come along down the pipe now that are vastly more gory than Hellraiser 2 is, and then that's not to take away how gory this movie is, but I think I'm going to back it down a little bit. I gave Hellraiser an 8. Remember that for that gore score, and I think that's accurate reflection of it. This movie has a little bit more in it. I mean, not a whole lot more, because I mean the first movie was pretty gory, but I think it does have a little bit more gore, and especially like I said, that mattress scene, the guy tearing himself up on there, that's that right there up the ante a little bit, and that the head open.
And they basically also replay all of the gore from the first one. Yeah,
and you get that.
Yeah.
And you see Pinhead getting his getting slashed with a knife to make the lines where the pins get hammered in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plenty of hooks tearing into flesh, as you would expect. So I think for this one, I think I'm going to go for a 9. I'm going to bump it up a little bit beyond the first Hellraiser movie, and I'll give it a 9. That might be a little generous. I mean, I can't give it an 8 because I gave Hellraiser an 8. We're not doing the end of the business of re-rating the gore score, but if I did have to do it over again, I might have backed it down to 7 and then give this one an 8. But hey, it's not that big a deal. Hair.
Yeah.
Some people will think this movie. Some people that haven't seen that much gore will think this movie, the first Hellraiser movie, is above a 10. If it could be above a 10, it's all where you're at, what level of movies you've seen. So I try to keep big picture in mind. There's movies that we haven't got to on this podcast yet.
Yeah.
And,
more gory than anything we've done so far, including Terrifier.
So that'll pretty much put a wrap up on Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, and like I said, we're into the series now, so we'll be getting around to Hellraiser 3 sooner or later, probably in the next few months or so, depending on what we've got scheduled and coming up and everything. One last little note on Hellbound here, Hellraiser 2, before we check out. The critics' scores, just to compare to what we just gave it. IMDb gave it 6.5 stars out of 10, and on Metascore, or Metacritic, the Metascore was 41. That's out of 100. Similar, or although a little higher, over on Rotten Tomatoes. On the tomato meter, that's out of 30 critic reviews as of recording this episode. It got a 50%. And then the audience score was actually 58%. And that's over 25,000 ratings over there. So, I guess that's pretty much fair with what we were saying there. It's kind of a, middle ground on all these things. So, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there before we check out. So, our next episode, episode 98, next week will be a Spookshow Spotlight. We're going to call it 100 Years of Horror, 1922. We're going to go back and talk about, I believe it was like 6 horror movies that came out in 1922. So, how often do you get a chance to talk about something that came out 100 years ago, right? So, we're going to pause and kind of celebrate those movies and talk about them a little bit, especially since we're nearing the 100th anniversary of the release of Nosferatu. I guess that's really all we need to say here this week, guys. Hopefully we'll get Will's rating here pretty soon so you can see what he had to say about Hellraiser 2. And then don't forget, we got episode 100, big things cooking for our big, anniversary episode there. So for Will and for Donnie and the Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast. We'll talk to you next week.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.